What is going on today, guys? Alright, so today we are going to be taking a look at this figure right here. This is the McFarlane DC Multiverse Rebirth Batman. And I do not think it is any surprise that I'm not a fan of this figure. Okay, I've talked about it extensively in a previous video with his thick thighs and birthing hips, and as we saw in the last video that I did about him, the worst Batman figure in DC Multiverse lineup. If you actually compare him to 6-inch scale figures like Marvel Legends, Bucky Cap figure, things like that, from his waist up, he is a 6-inch scale figure. His torso, his head, the length of his arms, the size of his hands, everything. He is a 6-inch scale figure with just really big, thick, long legs on him. And again, birthing hips. So he's just an odd looking figure. I love the costume, the paintwork is good on it, everything else is good on it, even like the cape. It's just an oddly proportioned figure. So today we're going to be looking at him and comparing him to this guy right here. This is of course the DC Direct Rebirth Batman, and honestly the only reason I got this guy was to compare him to this guy right here and see which is the better Batman figure, because I mean honestly, just going into it, it can't be this one because this one just is bad. It's just a bad figure all around. It is, in my opinion, the worst McFarlane figure that we have gotten in the DC Multiverse line. Not because of QC problems or paint apps or anything like that, but just because of the weird proportions on this guy. So let's go ahead and crack this guy open right here, and we will do a comparison of these two, and we'll see how they both stack up to each other. Alright, so here we have these two right next to each other, and first off, let's talk about the height here. They are basically both the same. The DC Direct might be slightly taller, but not much, just a smidge, but I don't think that really matters. What really stands out between these two is the length of the legs and arms. Obviously on the McFarlane, if you look, he's got longer legs and considerably shorter arms. And that just looks odd, especially when you pair that with the smaller chest and the smaller head. Again, you can tell essentially this guy is a 6-inch scale upper body on a 7-inch scale lower body, and the proportions just don't work for me. Whereas on the DC Direct, it just looks better. It looks much more proportioned to the way you would expect Batman to be. Here's a big hulking dude who runs around and works out all the time and fights criminals and does all these things, and he just stands out more. He's just a better proportioned figure, sculpted figure, whatever you want to call it. It just works better. And especially when you look at the arms themselves, and you look at the size of the arms, and not just the length, but the bulk of the biceps, and the bulk of the chest as well, the DC Direct really just looks, it just looks better. It just flat out looks better. Just, there's no doubt about that whatsoever. Now, one thing I will say for McFarlane is the sculpt is on point. And what I mean by that is the details in the boots, in the shin guards, the knee pads, the belt, the gauntlets and the gloves, the raised insignia on the chest. Everything is well sculpted, well done, even if the proportions are a little bit off. Whereas on this guy over here, all well done. Love the proportions. But there's no details on the boots or the knee pads. The belt doesn't have quite that V shape that I think looks a little bit better. The details on the gauntlets and the gloves are there, but not very much. And then the symbol here on his chest is painted, although painted beautifully. Very, very well done. Very crisp. Just, you know, it's not quite the same. The other thing, of course, is going to be the head size on these two guys. And obviously this guy's head is considerably smaller, and it just looks a little goofy with the size of his legs and thighs and birthing hips. It's just a bit odd looking. Another thing is, on the DC Direct, if you look at the cowl and the cape, it's all one piece all the way down to the cape. All the way from the neck peg all the way down. Looks really, really good. Whereas on the McFarlane figure, it's two separate pieces. Okay, so the cape and cowl don't actually form into one piece, it's a separate piece, and it just doesn't look as good, even though the suit itself has more details in it as far as the mold goes. It just doesn't look as good. The other thing is the gray on the DC Direct with that just slight hint of blue in it is much more comic accurate than the more dull, flat gray of the McFarlane one. So, I mean, just in general, while the McFarlane one does have nicer details on the gloves and boots and things like that, I do appreciate the raised emblem, that kind of stuff. It just doesn't hold a candle so far to this this Batman from DC Direct. Now, as far as articulation goes, I'm not going to go into all that. They're basically the same. Double jointed knees, double jointed elbows. They both have bicep swivels. The biggest difference is going to be the torso and the thigh swivels that we have here on this Batman. So, of course, on the DC Direct, you have thigh swivels there, and then he's got more of the traditional ab crunch with the twist at the waist there, like you would see on a Marvel Legends or a lot of other figures. So a little bit of difference there. I like both ways. I collect figures that have this type of ab crunch versus this type of torso articulation. I like both of them. I think they both work really, really well. So that's not really anything that's of preference to me personally. But in this case, you know, it is nice to have a figure that will, in my opinion, articulate better as far as that torso joint. Because one thing that McFarlane is known for is while they do have that torso dumbbell joint there, the ab crunch feature of having that really doesn't exist. They really don't crunch forward a lot, and that's kind of a shame. And then, of course, the other thing that I will note on this one is he does have calf swivel there as well, so you can move that around just a little bit right there if that's something that that you're into, if you want to get him into certain positions and things like that. So now that we've taken a look at both these guys, let's go ahead and do some comparisons and see how these two guys stack up with each other. Alright, so first up, let's compare it to some other McFarlane 7-inch scale Batman figures. Of course, on the left, we've got Detective Comics 1000. On the right, we've got the Batman from 3 Jokers. And both of these are much better proportioned than the McFarlane Rebirth. And I think in some ways, they're both a little probably better proportioned than the Rebirth from DC Direct as well. But the DC Direct is definitely the better of these two figures, and especially when you compare things like length of arms here. If you put them shoulder to shoulder, you see arm length is about the same and leg length is about the same, and that's because they're better proportioned than this guy right here having short arms and long legs. So again, if we're putting him on a shelf full of Batman figures, I'm definitely going to lean towards the DC Direct. Alright, so to line them up with Superman and Wonder Woman, the trinity of DC Comics, again, you get a good size comparison here, and what we've got here is Superman's a little bit taller than Batman, makes sense, and Wonder Woman is considerably taller than Batman, also makes sense. She's an Amazonian, and this particular one happens to be wearing high heels, so you would expect that, but just looking at this lineup here, definitely the one from DC Direct fits more in line with the big, bulky figures that we see here, the kind of gods of the DC universe, and the one from McFarlane just doesn't hold a candle. Alright, so sticking with McFarlane here for just a second, we've got a couple of Batman villains here. We've got Criminal Joker on the right, we've got Deathstroke on the left, and I will say, compared to these two bad guys, both of these figures are a little short, honestly. I would expect Deathstroke to be a little taller than Batman, potentially, and that's fine, but I don't think Joker should be taller than Batman, and in this case, Joker definitely is, so maybe both of these figures are a little on the short side for what you would want, but again, when you look at just the bulk of the one from DC Direct, he definitely feels more like a threatening presence to Deathstroke and to Joker than the one from McFarlane. So for some more 7-inch scale figures, we've got NECA's Defenders of the Earth, we've got the Phantom and Flash Gordon, and again, when you look at these two figures all in the same scale with the two we're looking at, when you look at the Phantom, who in his own way is a little Batman-esque, you look at the sculpt, the musculature, everything, the DC Direct definitely stands out as a more physically imposing character compared to the McFarlane one, when stacked up with these guys. Alright, so all that's left to talk about here is going to be the price. And with McFarlane Rebirth Batman, he retails for 20 bucks, and you can find him way cheaper than that at a lot of places. I've seen him go for around 16 bucks at Amazon, Best Buy, GameStop, Walmart, that kind of stuff. Hop online, and you can pick him up pretty cheap. The Rebirth Batman from DC Direct, on the other hand, is retailing at $30, and you really don't find him any cheaper than that. Even out of the package, I did not see any DC Direct Rebirth Batmans for less than 30 bucks. Now, it was pretty easy for me to find this one new in the package for 30 bucks, free shipping. It wasn't difficult to find it for that price, but finding it for less, gonna be kind of hard to do. So, just on a retail scale, you're talking about 20 bucks versus 30 bucks. That's a 50% upcharge for the DC Direct over the McFarlane. Is it worth it? My opinion, yes. Hell yes. Absolutely, yes. The DC Direct is a way better figure. It looks better in almost every way. And in this particular case, I don't even mind the fact that it has less details on it because it's more comic accurate without all the details on the boots and the gauntlets and the gloves and stuff. So I think it is a far better figure for more money, but a far better figure for your shelf. It looks better with other McFarlane action figures. It looks better with other 7-inch scale stuff. He just stands out more as a big kind of hulking muscular dude who's fighting criminals in the middle of the night. He just looks more like Batman, in my opinion, and that's what I want if I'm going to get a Batman Rebirth. I want the figure that screams Batman, and honestly, Mr. Birthing Hips over here doesn't scream Batman to me. It just doesn't. So I may be biased, I get it. I came into this video already not liking the McFarlane, but just trying to look at it from an unbiased point of view, I just simply see no way in which the McFarlane is even close to as good as the DC Direct. It just boggles my mind if anybody comes to that conclusion. I simply cannot wrap my head around it. So yes, in my opinion, this battle is easily won by the DC Direct Rebirth Batman. It is by far the better figure in every way as far as I'm concerned. It is more money, but it is worth that extra 10 bucks, hands down, if you're looking for a good Rebirth figure.